Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. My name is Jesse. The Orioles beat the Tampa Bay Rays 2 out of 3 games. But the more important thing for the Orioles, unfortunately, is we had some big injuries that may really affect the outlook of this team moving forward. So before I get into talking about the injuries, just want to say that Bet Online is your number one source for NBA and NHL playoffs this season. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds while the games are being played. When the game's over, head over to the online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Don't forget to use promo code BELIEVE for 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. And Bet Online is the game starts here. All right. So basically, yeah, as I said, the Orioles won 2 out of 3, but those 2 out of 3 wins came with a big cost. Now, uh, Tampa Bay Rays came into this series a game under 500, so they were not doing great. And the Orioles were playing at home, so a 2 out of 3 is not a bad result. But what is really disappointing is the injury and the injury news that came out of this series. So I'll start with what we found out most recently, or what we all witnessed or experienced most recently, and then I'll work backwards from that. So uh, on Sunday, basically in a this was so unfortunate, but basically a sort of freak accident type situation. Cedric Mullins was in the on deck circle or next to the on deck circle, waiting to hit, and Jorge Mateo was sort of starting to get his preparation going as well, from the dugout. He reached into the circle or near the circle to grab something, probably a donut or something along those lines, some sort of weight for the bat, although I don't know what he was grabbing or trying to grab. And Cedric Mullins was sort of swinging his bat behind his head. He didn't notice Mateo. Mateo didn't notice Mullins. There was just some, I guess, general lack of awareness on both of their parts, and Cedric Mullins ended up dropping his bat down onto Jorge Mateo's head. Now Mateo did have a helmet on, but based on how things looked after, the helmet must not have done too much, because he looked like for a while he was really, really struggling in pain. I think there's a big image that people have probably seen of him having his head on his hands in the dugout. The training staff, Brian Ebel, etc., tried to come over, trying to do whatever immediate assistance could be done in that moment to try to help. And now Jorge Mateo is now in concussion protocol. So a really sort of scary and dangerous situation. Not something you see happen very often. I mean, it is kind of a problem just in general. How things are sort of arranged is not ideal in Major League Baseball. With now, when I say that, I'm not saying that things could be designed better or there is necessarily a better way, but I am saying that there might be. There are a lot of dangers. I mean, of course, we have guys that are throwing a ball 90 plus miles an hour at a hitter, and the hitter can hit the ball in any direction. So Major League Baseball has started. I mean, I think we all know, or most of us know, have added the nets and extended them down each of the foul lines to protect fans. And but the dugouts, for instance, are still rather exposed at many parts from line drives and foul balls. So now, granted, this is not the situation of a ball coming off a batter's bat and making contact, but there is something about just sort of how things are sort of arranged in that dugout area, which does lead to some sort of safety concerns. Now, I always thought about it predominantly, and I think if I'm remembering right, Major League Baseball, I think, did something about this to try to prevent things like this happening. But of course, there's donuts, and you see a whole bunch of equipment sort of hanging out near the on deck circle. If you look at any Major League Baseball game, you'll see a bunch of equipment over at the on deck circle. And the big safety hazard that is most commonly experienced is when catchers try to catch a pop up foul ball. And they sort of are in danger to some extent and exposing themselves to some extent by potentially stepping on awkwardly one of those equipment items and possibly injuring themselves. So I guess the big thing in this particular situation, though, is just that there is not a big separation between where the on deck hitter is doing whatever warm up routine they're undergoing. There's not a big separation between that, between where the materials, where the equipment is all being held. And then the hitter in the hole, of course, often needs to get whatever equipment to sort of get ready and be prepared when they finally enter the on deck circle. So it was like a really sort of freak accident, or okay, freak accident is a little, maybe a little bit extreme, but it definitely was an uncommon thing. This isn't something you see happen in Major League Baseball. And there was, as I had said, a bit of unawareness on both of their parts. Now, it's an unfortunate injury. I don't think there's clearly anybody responsible in this situation, either Mateo or Mullins. I'm sure Mateo, I mean, this sort of is very much routine for all Major League Baseball players, right? To sort of go through the motions, and you're not really expecting a bat to sort of come and hit you unexpectedly. Mateo has done this millions of times, or thousands of times, or at a very bare minimum hundreds of times, and has never experienced anything like that. And Cedric Mullins, for his part, he's trying to get ready for the at bat. Okay, maybe he should have slid a few steps over, but I'm sure that Cedric Mullins normally stands there probably almost all the time when he's getting ready to hit. And I'm just assuming that based on hitters are very much in their routine and very much uh I'm sure they were playing at home, so I'm sure Cedric Mullins has a little space that he's carved out for where he decides to go to every time he's on deck. So just a really bad situation. And this kind of injury is frustrating just because you sort of this is sort of an injury that you could expect more at like the high school level or something along these lines, right? These major league players are normally so good and sort of so on top of these sorts of things that you don't really see this kind of thing happen. But it did happen. And now, yeah, Jorge Mateo is in concussion protocol, and of course his safety needs to be the priority right now, and his health and well-being. Ramon Orias did come into the game to replace him. So yeah, there is sort of a big predicament right now as to what well, I wouldn't say it's a huge predicament, but the Orioles do need to now replace potentially Jorge Mateo if it comes to that. So it is possible now. My guess, just from my basic understanding of this kind of thing, is that I would be pretty confident that Mateo will not play on Monday, and probably not even on Tuesday too. There is a 7-day IL for concussion protocol type stuff. Um Mateo has not been placed on that IL yet. However, um, it's possible that he will be, and that could happen. We are going to find out more, probably in the coming hours from the time this is released. And yeah, so sort of the question becomes, well, what do the Orioles do in the event that Jorge Mateo has sort of a sustained or longer injury? And when I say longer, even a week plus is sort of what I'm talking about. So, if he comes back in just a few days and everything's okay, then this question isn't as relevant. But if I am pretty confident that if Mateo does go on the IL, that just like what happened in the game today, Ramon Urias will take over at second base, and he will sort of be a more or less permanent fixture there, while Mateo is injured, with Westberg over at third. Um, I think that yeah, it's sort of Ramon Urias's position to have. And I think that this now I think most Oriole fans know Urias has been off to a rough start, particularly offensively, so far in this season. And he also has had some struggle getting playing time, and finding times to be utilized and be effective. I feel like most of the time this team does, and Brandon Hyde does a very good job getting and finding the best situations and spots for bench players and role players and stuff like this. And I think Ramon Urias has been, in part because he hasn't been hitting well. And of course, you could say, well, he hasn't been hitting well because he hasn't been playing a whole lot. And you can get into and think about that vicious cycle that exists between those two things. But he's been very underutilized, especially like regarding or relative to like his talent that he does have, um, as a Major League Baseball player, and that he's proven over several years, right? So he is like a rather sort of underutilized piece on this team. And if he does end up taking over for Mateo or playing uh fairly regularly for Mateo, I think it would hopefully be a good thing, especially if he could, maybe he can find something while having a little bit of continuity and a little bit of regular playing time. Maybe he can begin to start turning some of his poor offensive numbers around. So I think that would be nice to see. It would give him an opportunity that he hasn't had much of this year. So hopefully if he's able to take over at second base and play for a while Mateo is injured, that would be, I think, in my mind at least, ideal. Now, if Mateo does go on the IL, the question also would be, if he does go to the injured list, are the Orioles going to, well, the Orioles would presumably have to take a sort of add another infielder, or bring an infielder up to the major league level, to the major league club, in order to protect Mateo, or to replace him, is a better way to say that. So I do think that if this does end up happening, I think it will be Maton that comes to the major league team. Now, of course, the Orioles have a lot of exciting prospects down at AAA. There could be, yeah, I mean, of course, Jackson Holiday is there, but also even Connor Norby is there, if they want to stay away from bringing up Holiday. What I do think, though, is I have a feeling it will be Maton. And the reason I come to this is because I think that the Orioles, as I think we've talked about on this podcast, largely emphasize the long-term health, well-being, and development of prospects over the short-term winning of games, right? So I think that the Orioles, if they wanted any of these players to be up at this current moment, they would have done that. And they would be up and they would somehow find a way to fit them onto the team. And the fact that they don't want them at the major league level right now, I don't think that they are going to budge on what they are waiting for and what they are hoping for an injury to happen. Now, definitely, like a lot of times, there are situations where uh, we sort of want to promote somebody. We're excited and eager to promote somebody, but we just don't have the mechanism to do so because there hasn't been an injury. Our roster is sort of full. And because we want to maintain roster flexibility, etc., we're keeping them down until an opportunity arises. Now, that's certainly possible. But if the Orioles do not want these guys to come up yet, which I have a suspicion they don't, then I think that it will be Maton. We have him in the organization for a reason, and I think it's good that he is there in a situation like this, and he can sort of be the either utility, yeah, sort of the utility infielder for this team, while Mateo is potentially injured. So we are going to see about what the situation for Mateo is. I think we will know a lot more within the next 24 to 48 hours, if even that long. It might even be like from when this comes out, it might even be the next 8 or 10 hours. So, but I do think we'll know a lot quickly about his health status and his condition in yeah, very, very soon. So that should be encouraging. I wouldn't think that this could lead to like a long-term injury. Of course, there's always a possibility for that, but I'm hoping that that won't be the situation. And I think in all likelihood it won't be. So of course we have to hope and hope that he is okay and that he's feeling well. He has really, I mentioned Jorge Mateo in the last episode I did, and just how invaluable and how important he has been to this team. So this will be, I think, for the Orioles, if he does go on the IL and it is Urias that takes over at second base, at least for now, it will be a significant downgrade, especially with how they've been playing. Now, if it was Ramon Urias from the past, I would say it would be much less of a downgrade. If I think they sort of have different skill sets, and they each sort of could do something different and provide something different. Mateo, of course, has the speed, has potentially defensive ability and stuff like that. But I would have said that previously Urias was a better hitter, but he is not showing that right now, and definitely so far this year, Mateo has been significantly a better hitter. So unless Urias turns that around like fairly soon, it is going to be a downgrade at second base for the Orioles in the short term. So we will see what happens with that. In other really significant negative injury news, this happened. We found this out a couple days or so prior to finding or experiencing and witnessing Mateo's injury. But we found out that both Tyler Wells and John Means are going to undergo season-ending UCL surgery to repair the UCL. For John Means, that's going to be in his left elbow, which makes sense because he's a left-handed pitcher. And for Tyler Wells, that's going to be in his right elbow because, not surprisingly, he's a right-handed pitcher. So I guess we can start with Means. First of all, this is like really, really devastating news, like really devastating. and really, really difficult news to hear for him. Um, Oriole fans, I think, need to begin to evaluate and consider the possibility that we will never see John Means pitch another game in an Oriole uniform. I actually think that is the Hmm. Well, I think it is the likeliest scenario, or I guess a better way to say this is I think that it is likelier that he will not pitch another game for the Orioles than it is that he will pitch another game for the Orioles. He is supposed to be a free agent at the end of this season, and this surgery is going to keep him out the rest of this year and potentially a lot of 2025 as well. So I think it is more likely than not that John Means will never pitch another game for the Orioles. The Orioles would have to re-sign him and figure out some sort of agreement in order for that to happen. And especially with the talent the Orioles have and the fact that the Orioles are in a mode of trying to win immediately and win right now. I think that it wouldn't make a lot of sense for the Orioles front office to try to go after a guy as unreliable health wise as John Means is when you're trying to win a World Series and build a playoff roster and a playoff winning roster. So relying and signing John Means in that situation wouldn't make a lot of sense. Now, I do think there are other teams that would try to sign John Means. Particularly the bad teams, I think, would give him a shot. I think that he's going to be sort of in a situation where there's a good possibility that it's going to be a low cost, but potentially high reward for a team. So maybe a non-contending team or a team that doesn't plan to contend could say, "Hey, John Means, give him a few $1 million. Hopefully, he's incentivized to come back, to have a good year, to demonstrate that he's healthy, to then eventually get another more sizable, hopefully higher monetary contract." Um, so I think that would sort of be the thinking. And then if a bad team gets him and he performs well, then maybe he could be a trade chip at a deadline or something along those lines. Or if they bring him back in 2025, he puts a few good starts together. Of course, the injury concerns will still be present, and that would be like a big consideration. I think that teams would have to. How can you not at this point with John Means take his injuries into consideration? But there might be a possibility for a bad team to invest a little bit of money and then potentially say, hey, like maybe this guy can figure things out. Maybe he can stay healthy and be the pitcher that he's demonstrated that he can be. So it is really, really frustrating. I think it's emotionally difficult for Oriole fans. John Means has been on this team for a long time. He was on this team when we're not playing as well. So he's seen a lot of the negativity, and he's been around a lot of the negativity and the bad years for the Orioles. I have a little difficult time referring to them as like the bad years, even though they were really bad. When I think about the bad years in my head, I think about what we referred to on this show as the dark ages and, when we were children and stuff. But the Orioles, of course, had really, really bad years not too long ago in the past. And John Means was around for a lot of that. So it's really difficult to watch. He's like thinking about John Means, he has had almost as rough a career with injuries as almost anybody else that I can immediately think of on the top of my head. Um, yeah, so not a lot of guys have to go through, not a lot of pitchers. Sometimes pitchers will have a career ending injury and they sort of know it's a career ending injury or they think there's a very good possibility of that. But the sort of emotional turmoil John Means, I'm sure, has had to experience and had to go through just feeling like going through this long process, not pitching in forever, and then coming back and then almost you know just weeks into sort of feeling like you're getting stabilized and back integrated into the rotation, then you come out with something like this, and the basically the process has to start all over. Of Yeah, the process has to start all over, and you have to go through another whole injury that you have to have surgery for, and repair and everything. So it's just yeah, and there are not a lot of guys, I think, that have had this level of difficulty that John Means has had with injuries. And just also thinking about the level of interference that his injuries have had with his career, keeping him off the field for these extended periods of time. It is just really, really unfortunate. And um there's probably not a lot of control that he has or the training staff has over this. Now, maybe there are things that could have been done differently, but John Means, I'm sure, is just following the training regimen that he's been given and recommended by, uh, the teams and the training teams that collaborate and try to figure out what makes sense for personalized workout plans and stuff like that. But overall, John Means has it's been a really, really rough few years after seemingly a nice start to his career, and the injuries have really, really derailed a lot of his career. Now I think he's 32 at the current time, so it's not out of the question that a rebound and some sort of return to the major leagues and to effective being an effective starting pitcher is not necessarily off the table for him in its entirety, but he's really missed several prime years of his career when starting pitchers are supposed to be on the field pitching, and the injuries have really gotten in the way of that. So I mean, just to sort of highlight this, I mean, John Means has thrown under 60 innings in the past 3 years. So just to kind of highlight how infrequently he's actually been on the mound for the Orioles, is 60 innings is, I mean, it's on average 20 innings a year, which is just, three starts or four starts or something. So, it's really unfortunate to see this and to see this for him. And yeah, I mean, if he's not on the Orioles, definitely hope that he has a good career, moving forward. And we will update. It would be great from an emotional sort of perspective if the Orioles found a way to figure out some sort of way to retain him, to bring him back for the next season. But it's as I said, I think it's unlikely. So really, really unfortunate news for him. And then of course, basically at the same time, we got the news that Tyler Wells is also going to have season-ending UCL surgery. Now, this hurts the Orioles immediately in the short term. This is not Tyler Wells's first injury, but this is certainly Tyler Wells's biggest injury that he has had in his career. And this is going to be a thing that the Orioles have to try to navigate. So I think that basically what the Orioles are doing now, also because Dean Kramer is injured, we have our main three: Corbin Burns, Grayson Rodriguez, and Kyle Bradish, that sort of head the rotation. And right now we're using Cole Irvin and Albert Suarez in the 4 and 5 slots for the starting rotation. And Now Tyler Wells has not been pitching So he's not really in that conversation. So yeah, and he hasn't been used as a starter recently. So the Orioles need to try to figure out what's going to happen. He wasn't pitching, so the sort of status quo of this Orioles team right now sort of remains the same. But in terms of pitching depth and options, the fact that he is not going to be an option for the Orioles in the foreseeable future is difficult for the Orioles to sort of stomach, especially with uh, how uh, how much flux this Orioles rotation has been in just at the beginning of the season, right? So the fact that Tyler Wells is not going to be an option or even a bullpen option, which we've talked a bit about the bullpen on this show, and especially with the potential that he has at the back end of the bullpen, he could have been a really important and valuable piece. So both of those things are not going to be options for the Orioles. And we will see what even his status with the Orioles is moving forward. It is possible that he gets non-tendered, but I think that's unlikely to happen. I think eventually the Orioles will find a way to bring him back, and I think he will be back. But so just two really big and two really unfortunate injuries for the Orioles. It doesn't change much of the current composition of the Orioles, and I think Oriole fans need to be really impressed with both Cole Irvin and with Albert Suarez taking over to pitch. And even if either of those, even if Tyler Wells did return to the major league team and was able to pitch at this moment, it's not clear to me that he would immediately take over a starting spot. In fact, I think it'd be likelier that he got sent to the bullpen. So, yeah, in terms of that, I don't think it does affect too much in the immediate composition. I think what is potentially affected is options. If guys were to go injured, he's of course not going to be available to a spot start. I think this does mean that someone like Povich is closer to being to the major leagues, or yeah, I do think that it does accelerate his pathway to the major leagues, because Tyler Wells won't be an option in the starting rotation. Yeah, we will see what happens with that. Like I was saying before, I sort of do think it's the same thing with Povich. As I was saying with like Norby and Holiday, that I think they're not going to come up until the front office is ready and wants them to come up. Yeah, but we will see. And I think that uh, yeah, I think that Suarez and Irvin are basically going to hold the two rotation spots down until Dean Kramer returns. One of them will get sent to the bullpen. Yeah, my suspicion being Albert Suarez, but we'll see about that. That might not be the case. Yeah, so we'll see. But the Orioles, their depth took a big hit. And it's really difficult, and especially for John Means, seeing um this happen. The depth for the starting rotation took a big hit, and especially for John Means. Hopefully yeah, hopefully he can find a way to salvage something out of his career, because he's getting older and he's been out for a long time, not pitching for a long time, and yeah, and it's not going to get easier, and there's a potential that these injuries are going to compound, and that they are going to linger, and these sorts of things. So yeah, you never want a situation where part of your body is compensating for another part of your body that is that sort of thing, that is struggling or suffering. due to an injury. So really, really unfortunate. Coming up, the Orioles do start a 4-game series against Toronto. The health of this team right now, I think, should be the priority for Oriole fans. Um, it is a good thing. It's not a good thing that the Orioles are going through these health issues, but it is a good thing that if these health issues are going to happen, they are happening at the beginning of the season when the Orioles still have time to figure things out and manage them. It's fortunate that the Orioles don't go out, get a top of the line starting pitcher, and then find out 2 weeks after that they're going to be injured for the rest of the season or something like that. So the Orioles do have plenty of time to figure out these sorts of to make sort of decisions at the trade deadline about what they want to do in reaction to all of the, especially starting pitching injuries and stuff like this. So there is time for the Orioles to navigate that, but it really, really, really is sad, and it sucks for these pitchers and just for the organization overall, and for Mateo too, not just the pitchers, that these are happening. And I'm sure it's emotionally difficult on the pitchers and on Mateo that they have to go through this. So anyway, the O's have 4 coming up with Toronto. Yeah, like I said, if the O's stay healthy, this will be fortunate. It feels like the Orioles have had really, really negative and unfortunate stretches of injuries over the past few weeks, and basically since the beginning of the season. Bradish was the first person, sort of the first domino in this domino effect, unless I'm forgetting someone. But I think Bradish was basically the first one who got injured, or at least a big or a key player for the Orioles to get injured. And then it sort of spiraled from there. And yeah, it's been really, really a rough start. And I think the Orioles have had more injuries than a normal Major League Baseball team deserves. That's my opinion on that. So anyway, hopefully we'll get some wins against Toronto. You can feel free to like or subscribe. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Feel free to give us a rating, a review if you are listening to this on a podcast app. If you want to reach out to the show, you can feel free to email thewarehousepod@gmail.com. And if you want to follow the show on either Instagram or X, you can follow at The Warehouse Pod. So thank you so much for listening. My name is Jesse. This has been The Warehouse Podcast, and go O's.